The spotlight found him the way it always did. Warm, certain, inevitable. Nathaniel Adams Coles, known to the world as Nat King Cole, stood at the piano on the stage of Birmingham Municipal Auditorium, his fingers resting lightly on the keys. April 10th, 1956. A Tuesday night that should have been like 1,000 nights before it. Music, applause, connection. The routine magic of a man whose voice had become synonymous with elegance itself. 1,800 people filled the seats. Black and white, though seated separately as Alabama law required. The color line ran invisible but absolute through the center of the auditorium. Still, they had come together in a fragmented way to hear the same voice, the same songs, the same man who had somehow made loneliness sound beautiful on the radio. Nat was 40 minutes into his set. He'd just finished Autumn Leaves, his voice carrying that particular ache that made heartbreak sound like something worth experiencing. The crowd had responded with warmth, the kind of applause that told a performer he was reaching people, not just entertaining them, reaching them. He smiled his quiet smile, the one that never demanded attention but somehow commanded it anyway. He was about to begin Sweet Lorraine when he noticed movement in his peripheral vision. 6 men rising from the front rows. White men, moving with purpose toward the stage. For a split second, Nat thought they might be fans. Overeager audience members wanting an autograph mid-show. It happened sometimes, especially in smaller venues. But something about their movement felt wrong. Too synchronized, too deliberate, too fast. And then they were climbing onto the stage. What happened in the next 90 seconds would become one of the most shocking moments in American entertainment history. But the real story wasn't just the violence. It was what came after. What Nat King Cole chose to do with his rage, his fear, his platform, and his dignity. That choice would ripple through the civil rights movement and change the course of American music forever. But first, there was the attack. Before we understand the weight of that Birmingham night, we need to understand the man standing at that piano. Because Nat King Cole wasn't supposed to be there at all. Not in Birmingham, not on a stage, not in the position of being one of the most successful recording artists in America, despite being black in an industry and a country that wanted to keep him invisible. Nathaniel Adams Coles was born in Montgomery, Alabama in the son of a Baptist minister who believed in discipline, education, and the power of music to reach places words couldn't. His mother played organ at their church, and young Nat absorbed music the way other children absorbed language. It wasn't something he learned, it was something he breathed. By age 4, he was playing piano. Not picking out melodies, playing. By 12, he was performing in church, his small hands moving across the keys with an instinct that looked like memory from another life. His father recognized the gift but worried about it. The music world was not kind to black men. It used them, celebrated them in the dark corners of clubs and late-night radio, then discarded them when the sun came up. "You have a gift from God," his father told him once. "But the world will try to take it from you and give you nothing in return." Nat listened. He understood, but he also knew that the music inside him wasn't a choice. It was a necessity. Like breathing or believing. You couldn't negotiate with it. The family moved to Chicago when Nat was young, settling in the Bronzeville neighborhood where black culture thrived, despite the limitations imposed from outside. There, Nat formed his first band while still a teenager. The piano became his first voice, more articulate than words, more honest than any conversation he'd have with the white booking agents who controlled where he could play, and for how much. He formed the King Cole Trio in piano, bass, guitar, no drums. The absence of percussion made every note matter more, created space where most bands filled it with noise. Nat's piano playing was sophisticated, rooted in jazz but accessible enough to reach beyond the clubs. And when he started singing, almost by accident because a drunk patron demanded vocals one night, everything changed. The voice was unlike anything on the radio. Smooth but not slick, warm but never cloying. There was an ache beneath the elegance, a suggestion that the man singing about love and longing understood both intimately. He didn't perform emotions, he inhabited them. By the late 1940s, Nat King Cole was no longer just a jazz pianist. He was a star, Mona Lisa, Nature Boy, Too Young, songs that became the soundtrack to post-war America's dreams and disappointments. White audiences loved him because his music felt safe, sophisticated, non-threatening. Black audiences loved him because he was theirs, proof that excellence could not be completely suppressed. But that success came with complications no hit record could solve. Nat bought a house in the all-white Hancock Park neighborhood of Los Angeles in 1948. The backlash was immediate. Neighbors circulated petitions. Someone burned a cross on his lawn. The local homeowners association tried to enforce restrictive covenants to force him out. Nat's response was characteristically quiet but absolute. "I just want to be a good neighbor." He stayed. But the message was clear. Success did not mean acceptance. 1 million records sold did not mean he could live where he chose. A voice that white America loved on the radio became a problem when attached to a black body in their neighborhood. This was the tension Nat lived inside every day. Celebrated and restricted, admired and unwanted. The voice that made people feel safe, while the man himself was never truly safe anywhere. By 1956, he was one of the highest paid performers in America. He had his own television variety show, the first black person to host a network TV program. Sponsors refused to support it despite good ratings. Unwilling to associate their brands with a black host, the show would be canceled within a year, not for lack of talent or audience, but because corporate America would not take that step. But on April 10, Nat was still fighting for that show, still believing that excellence and dignity might eventually overcome prejudice, still performing in segregated venues across the South because he believed music could reach places politics couldn't. That belief would be tested in Birmingham. The concert had been controversial from the beginning. The North Alabama Citizens Council, a white supremacist group, had protested the performance. They distributed leaflets calling Nat a symbol of integration and race mixing, urging white citizens to boycott the show. The language was vicious, designed to inflame rather than persuade. Still, the show went on. Nat's management believed the auditorium's segregated seating arrangement would satisfy local customs. Black audiences on one side, white on the other, both watching the same stage. A compromise that satisfied no one but allowed the performance to happen. Nat stood backstage before the show, his tuxedo immaculate as always, his expression unreadable. Maria Cole, his wife, had traveled with him despite warnings from friends that Birmingham wasn't safe. She knew her husband. He would perform where he was contracted to perform. Danger didn't change that. "You don't have to do this," she'd said earlier that day. "We can pay the cancellation fee." Nat had looked at her with those steady eyes that rarely showed what he was feeling. "If I cancel every time someone threatens me, I'll never perform south of Chicago." She understood. But understanding didn't make the fear go away. The first 40 minutes of the show went smoothly. The audience was warm, responsive in that careful way Southern crowds could be when uncertain about showing too much enthusiasm. Nat performed his hits, his voice carrying the same intimate quality that made his records feel like personal messages. For those 40 minutes, music created an illusion of unity in a room divided by law and custom. Then 6 white men stood up from the front rows of the white section. At first, Nat thought it might be applause-related, but they weren't clapping. They were moving toward the stage with synchronized purpose. Within seconds, they were climbing up, and the realization hit Nat like cold water. This wasn't admiration. This was something else entirely. The first man to reach him was later identified as Kenneth Adams, a member of the North Alabama Citizens Council. He grabbed Nat from behind, tackling him backward. The piano bench crashed. The microphone stand fell with a metallic scream. Other attackers rushed forward, fists raised. Nat's band members froze for a crucial second, brains struggling to process what eyes were seeing. This wasn't supposed to happen. Not on a stage, not during a performance. There were rules. Even in the segregated South, the stage was supposed to be neutral territory. But there were no rules protecting Nat King Cole that night. The attack lasted approximately 90 seconds before police and venue security finally intervened. 90 seconds that felt infinite while happening and too fast to properly remember afterward. Nat was shoved, struck, knocked off balance, his back wrenched, his dignity assaulted more than his body, though both bore the impact. When police finally pulled the attackers off, Nat stood slowly, his tuxedo disheveled, his composure shattered in a way audiences had never seen. He wasn't bleeding. The physical injuries were minor, but something else had been broken. The audience sat in stunned silence. Some black audience members had started to rush forward to help, but were blocked by police. White audience members sat frozen, some horrified, others expressionless, their silence a form of complicity. The Birmingham police arrested the attackers, though the charges would be minimal and the sentences lighter still. They escorted Nat backstage. The concert was over. The attack had lasted 90 seconds. Its consequences would last decades. Backstage, Maria found Nat sitting on a metal folding chair, staring at nothing. She'd watched the attack from the wings, helpless to stop it, and the rage she felt was almost physical. But Nat's face showed something else. Not anger. Not fear. Something more complicated. Something like resignation mixed with exhaustion. "I'm tired, Maria," he said quietly. "I'm so tired of this." She knelt beside him, taking his hands. They were shaking slightly, the only outward sign of what he'd just experienced. "We're going home," she said. "Right now, we're leaving." But they didn't leave immediately. Nat insisted on meeting with local NAACP leaders who'd rushed to the auditorium after hearing about the attack. They wanted him to press charges, to make a public statement condemning the violence, to use this moment to advance the civil rights cause. Nat listened to their passionate arguments, their strategic reasoning, their moral certainty, And then he said something that would be quoted and misquoted, praised and criticized for years to come. "I just came here to entertain. I'm not a politician. I'm a singer." The NAACP leaders looked at him with disappointment, bordering on anger. Here was an opportunity, a clear documented act of racial violence against one of the most famous black men in America. It could be used to highlight the brutality of segregation, to mobilize support for change. But Nat wasn't interested in being mobilized. He was interested in survival. And he knew, with the weary certainty of a man who'd spent his entire career navigating white spaces, that becoming a political symbol would end his mainstream career. The white audiences who bought his records would abandon him. The television show, already struggling to find sponsors, would die immediately. So he made a choice. Not to be silent exactly, but to maintain the careful balance he'd always walked. Entertainer, not activist. Artist, not revolutionary. The criticism came swiftly. Civil rights leaders accused him of complicity, of choosing personal success over collective struggle. How could he perform in segregated venues? How could he remain neutral when violence had been done to him personally? How could he refuse to use his platform for justice? Nat absorbed the criticism without defending himself publicly. But privately, with Maria, he raged. "They want me to sacrifice everything I've built because 6 idiots attacked me on stage? They want me to give up my career, my ability to support my family, my music, so I can become a symbol. I didn't ask to be a symbol. I asked to be a singer." Mariah understood both sides. The activists were right that someone with Nat's visibility could move public opinion, but they didn't have to live inside Nat's skin, didn't have to balance on the knife edge he walked every day between black enough and non-threatening enough. "What do you want to do?" she asked him. Nat was quiet for a long time. "I want to keep singing," he finally said. "But not in the South. Never again in the South. I'm done performing for people who might hurt me for existing." And he kept that promise. Nat King Cole never performed in the American South again. Not for money. Not for charity. Not for any reason. The attack in Birmingham had drawn a line he would not cross again. But here's what most people don't know about what happened after Birmingham. The part that gets left out of the quick retellings. The part that matters more than the attack itself. Nat didn't become a public civil rights activist in the traditional sense. He didn't march. He didn't give speeches at rallies. He didn't join the SCLC or make inflammatory statements to the press. But he did something else. Something quieter, and perhaps more subversive. He integrated American entertainment from the inside. After Birmingham, Nat became even more determined to succeed on his own terms. The television show might fail due to lack of sponsors, but he would keep recording, keep performing in venues that respected him, keep proving that black excellence couldn't be erased or assaulted into submission. He recorded songs with increasingly sophisticated arrangements, working with Nelson Riddle and other top orchestrators usually reserved for white crooners. He demanded and received payment equal to white performers at major venues. He refused to perform anywhere that required segregated seating, which effectively meant refusing the entire South, but accepting better conditions everywhere else. And he did something else that often goes unmentioned. He mentored younger black artists, using his connections and credibility to open doors. He insisted that orchestras and backing musicians for his recordings include black players, integrating union sessions that had been white only. He quietly funded civil rights organizations while refusing to make public statements about it. Nat King Cole's activism was economic and structural rather than rhetorical. He forced the industry to treat black talent as equal by being so undeniably excellent that exclusion became economically irrational. The Birmingham attack had shown him that performance alone wouldn't change hearts, but it could change systems, and changing systems would eventually force hearts to follow or be left behind. The years after Birmingham were Nat's most commercially successful. Ramblin' Rose, Those Lazy Hazy Crazy Days of Summer, LOVE. These weren't protest songs. They were gorgeously crafted pieces of popular music that happened to be performed by a black man who refused to be diminished. And audiences responded. Not just black audiences. Not just white liberal audiences. Everybody. Because the music was that good. And the voice was that essential. But the toll was visible to those who knew him. Maria watched her husband work himself relentlessly. Recording albums, performing concerts, making television appearances, always impeccably dressed, always professionally gracious, always walking the line between authenticity and acceptability. "He's exhausted," she told a close friend in 1963, emotionally. "He's tired of being the exception, tired of proving himself over and over, tired of being good enough to be loved but not good enough to be safe." In 1964, Nat was diagnosed with lung cancer. He'd been a heavy smoker for years, a habit he'd picked up in late-night club days and never quit. The cancer was aggressive. Within months it became clear that treatment wasn't working. He died on February 15, 1965, at age 45. Too young, too talented, too necessary to be gone. The tributes poured in from every corner of the entertainment world. White crooners who'd competed with him for chart positions praised his artistry. Black musicians who'd followed paths he'd cleared honored his quiet courage. Even some of the civil rights leaders who'd criticized him after Birmingham acknowledged that his path, while different from theirs, had mattered. But perhaps the most meaningful tribute came from Harry Belafonte, an artist who'd taken a more publicly activist stance than Nat. At Nat's funeral, Belafonte said something that captured the complexity of the man they were mourning. Nat King Cole integrated American music not by demanding it, but by being so undeniably excellent that exclusion became impossible. He didn't shout, he sang, and the whole world had no choice but to listen. That was Nat's legacy. Not the attack in Birmingham, though that moment revealed the violence beneath America's racial surface. Not the criticism from activists who wanted him to be more militant. Not even the string of hit records, though those mattered enormously. His legacy was proving that black artistry could be sophisticated, commercial, and uncompromising all at once. That you didn't have to perform blackness in the ways white audiences expected, or white supremacists feared to be authentically yourself. That quiet dignity in the face of hatred was a form of resistance, as valid as any march or sit-in. The 6 men who attacked him in Birmingham faced minimal consequences. Kenneth Adams and his accomplices served brief jail sentences, paid small fines, and returned to their lives. The North Alabama Citizens Council disbanded eventually, but the ideology that motivated the attack never fully disappeared. But Nat King Cole's voice outlasted all of them. It outlasted segregation. It outlasted Jim Crow. It outlasted the people who wanted to silence him. Today, Unforgettable plays in restaurants and hotel lobbies and movie soundtracks. New generations discover Mona Lisa and Nature Boy without knowing the context in which they were created. The voice has been separated from the struggle, which is both a loss and a victory. A loss because the struggle mattered, a victory because the music transcended it. Maria Cole spent decades after Nat's death protecting his legacy, ensuring that younger generations understood both the artistry and the obstacles he'd overcome. When their daughter Natalie recorded Unforgettable as a duet with her father's archived vocal in 1991, it became a massive hit, introducing Nat's voice to a new generation. That duet, made possible by technology that didn't exist when Nat was alive, became a metaphor for his entire legacy. His voice continuing to reach people long after his death, his artistry outlasting his mortality, the warmth he created in 3-minute songs surviving decades of cultural change. The Birmingham attack happened because 6 men couldn't tolerate a black man standing on a stage, commanding attention, receiving applause, existing as fully human in a space they believed belonged only to them. They wanted to humiliate him, to put him in what they considered his place, to make an example that would discourage other black performers from claiming equal space. They failed absolutely, because Nat King Cole kept singing, kept recording, kept integrating orchestras and venues, and the very structure of American music, not by demanding, not by fighting in ways that would let them call him aggressive or threatening, but by being so excellent, so dignified, so necessary, that exclusion became impossible. That was the real story of Birmingham. Not 90 seconds of violence, but the 45 years of excellence that preceded it, and the 60 years of influence that followed. The voice that 6 men tried to silence has been heard billions of times since. It will be heard billions more. And every time someone puts on Unforgettable, or Mona Lisa, every time that voice fills a room with warmth and ache and timeless elegance, Nat King Cole wins again. Not because violence didn't happen, but because music proved stronger than violence. Because artistry outlasted hatred. Because one man decided that the best response to people trying to diminish him was to keep being undeniably, magnificently, unforgettably himself. That's legacy. That's victory. That's the story of Nat King Cole.